With Kirby in the Forgotten Land coming out in a few months, or who knows, it might already be out by now due to how long it takes for me to upload, I've decided to finally get off my high horse and do something about this massive countdown that I've had in my back pocket for years now. What are, in my opinion, the best and worst copy abilities in the Kirby series? Before we get into that, however, you may have noticed the title only says top 50 rather than top 63. This is because I'm excluding the following abilities for one reason or another. Sleep, Light, Copy, Crash, Paint, Festival, Cook, and Mike are all limited use abilities and are basically impossible to rank in comparison to all the others. If you want to know how I'd rank them compared to each other, well, rewind the video a couple seconds because I just told you my ordering of them, from worst to best. Burning, Plasma, and Freeze are all being ranked in conjunction with their parent abilities, those being Fire, Spark, and Ice respectively. Balloon and Wrestler are each exclusive to spin-off games and are therefore technically non-canon. I have no other reason to exclude them other than if I did rank these, I wouldn't have 50 abilities total, which is a very pretty number. One last thing before the countdown starts is that I unfortunately cannot record footage of several different abilities. I only currently know how to record footage on the Switch, so the only abilities I can gather footage for are the ones that appear in Kirby Star Allies, Kirby Fighters 2, Kirby's Adventure, Kirby Superstar, Super Kirby Clash, and Kirby's Dream Land 3. The abilities that do not appear in these games will unfortunately be left with only a static image of that ability. Not ideal, I know, but the part that really hurts is that one of these abilities is my #1 favorite. Anyways, I do believe all of you have been waiting for far too long for this list, so without further ado, I present my top 50 favorite Kirby copy abilities. We all knew these were going to be the two contenders for worst ability, don't even think you're surprised. As for who's the worst of the worst, well, with Metal, as bad as it is at least making you invincible. It still doesn't protect you from bosses or mini-bosses, and makes it impossible to move, impossible to jump, and just sucks ass in every other regard. But it still has some form of upside. Mini, on the other hand, does absolutely nothing. You are a complete sitting duck. You can't fly, you can't inhale, you can't slide kick, you can't do anything. You have no method of self-defense with Mini at all. It is purely used for puzzle solving. So congratulations, Metal, you did it. You are better than the worst ability in this series. You still suck, though. You know, when I think of an ability that gives you the rare skill to fly infinitely without the need to mash A like your life depended on it, I usually think of something like UFO, which is absurdly powerful and can shred through even bosses like a hot knife through butter. And then we have Cupid. This ability is laughably slow, laughably weak, has laughable range, and is just awful in every single aspect other than the fact that it gives you infinite flight. But who cares when literally everything else about it is so utterly useless? Honestly, at this rate, I'd just take Metal. At least that one can actually kill. This one hurts. It's such a cool concept and could be executed so much better, but it was relegated to the games that have restrictive movesets for nearly every ability, which, believe me, is going to be a running theme throughout the bottom half of this list. It's only ever been in Adventure, Amazing Mirror, and Squeak Squad, where in all 3 games it only had one attack, Shoot Beam. No more, no less. Not even in Squeak Squad, where its only upgrade was a larger beam. Not even a charge shot, or a multi-shot, or an aiming feature, or, goddammit, anything! Bring this one back, Hal! Make it into something more than just a joke, and give it the time of day it deserves. Ah, Needle. What choice words I have to say about you. This ability ends up being just a far worse version of Spark. A huge part of what makes an ability good is how well the attacks combo into each other. Needle, in none of its appearances throughout the series, has any sort of fluidity at all. But, unlike other abilities that are like this, such as Spark or Stone, it is annoyingly weak and has pitiful range. Even with the upgrades it got in Return to Dreamland, it is still lacking in several aspects. It got a minor range upgrade in the form of being able to shoot spines and create a massive upwards and downward strike, but it has absolutely no horizontal range aside from the needle shot, which is in and of itself both time-consuming and incredibly weak. It doesn't help that it's also slow, with the sole exception of Return to Dreamland, where it had an admittedly cool dash move, but it doesn't have that in any other installment. At least this ability looks cool in Forgotten Land. These next two are a bit odd. They're basically just a glorified inhale, but somehow worse? Yeah, the reason I don't like Bat Drop or Suplex anywhere near as much as any of the other abilities is because these are 2 of 3 abilities that outright require you to pick up an enemy. There are some abilities that have a cool attack where if you're standing right next to an enemy, you can pick them up and do something cool with them, such as Fighter, Ninja, Beetle, or even Parasol. But all of these grab attacks are completely optional, but in the case of Suplex and Backdrop, you need to do this. You can't do anything else. Thankfully, they do give you more than 2 inches of grab room, but even still, it's just not enough to make it good in my eyes. Oh, and my justification for why Suplex is higher than Backdrop is because Backdrop doesn't have a pinpoint kick like Suplex does. Before I go into this next one, I just want to state that Amazing Mirror is the only Kirby game that introduced new abilities, excluding Canvas Curse, that I've never played. There are others that I haven't played, such as Kirby 64 or Dreamland 2, but none of them actually introduced any new abilities, so they aren't of much importance. Unfortunately, Missile is the only ability other than Mini on this list to be exclusively in Amazing Mirror, which means it's the only one that matters that I've never used. From what I can tell, it's basically just wheel, but it can fly. Literally just now, as I was writing this portion of the script, I went and looked up an Amazing Mirror emulator so I could have any form of experience using this ability, and let me tell you, it's just as bad as I thought it was going to be. From the less than 10 minutes I spent playing it, I can confirm that it is difficult to control, explodes upon contact with any enemy, meaning that it cannot barrel through waves of enemies unlike Wheel. Additionally, Wheel was playable in a game other than Amazing Mirror, meaning that it was given a list of moves that outnumbers the sides of a coin. Missile, however, what you see is what you get. I don't even know where to start with Bell. I just don't like it. At the very least, it has a full moveset. The only problem is that all those moves just aren't good. Once again, the attacks just don't combo into each other. A lot of them feel more like combo finishers rather than combo starters or combo continuers. The only one that fits these definitions is the basic attack, which only really combos into the ding finale. The whole ability just feels way too clunky and slow. It's just bad. This one hurts even more than Laser does. I love the concept of this ability more than any other ability on this entire list. Being able to control enemies and use their own abilities is an amazing idea. It's a shame that your puppets are all frail, can't leave their own rooms, can't fly like you can, and you need these puppets to attack, because without them, you can't do anything. If a boss doesn't spawn enemies, you're just screwed. If they would just bring this back with a revamped moveset, it would be so much better. Quite ironically, it was used once and then completely ghosted. Ball is infamously bad, but I'm giving it a bonus points for being a funny idea. Stripping Kirby of all of his limbs and turning him into a bouncy ball of death is a hilarious concept, and is just as stupid as it sounds. It's hard to control, doesn't grant you invincibility unless you're really good with the timing on the boingy boingy, meaning you're probably going to end up taking more damage than dealing damage. The uncontrollability of it also leads to very frequently sending you hurtling into bottomless pits. It's funny, but it's still bad. Not much else to say about it. Wait, I hear you asking, why is Throw ranked so much higher than Suplex and Backdrop when Throw is also just a glorified inhale? The exact thing you criticized those two abilities is now suddenly a good thing? Well, let me explain. The angles in which Suplex throws the enemy are really weird and affected by gravity. I actually have to think before I hurl the enemy because I might just end up missing completely. Throw, on the other hand, throws the enemy in a straight line, no planning needed. Suplex requires advanced calculus just to use, whereas Throw is raw unga bunga. Unfortunately, throw still suffers from a lot of the same problems as suplex and backdrop, so it can't go any higher than this. These next two I can only describe as situational novelties, meaning they do a thing, they do it well, but they don't do much else. The first of which is the one with more verticality, that of course being high jump. High jump is really good at going up in a 2D side-scroller. The issue should be readily apparent. It is really, really good at vertical travel and taking out enemies above Kirby. The only problem is that this isn't going to be happening all that often. For what it does, it's phenomenal, but once it's put in any other situation, it kinda stinks. The more horizontal of the two situational abilities, and by far the more useful of the two. It's fun to zoom around using wheel, and it's incredible for just getting through an area fast, but the problem arises when one considers that the level design for most Kirby games aren't just flat stretches of land. They have multiple large gaps and walls, and because Wheel Kirby can only jump once, it's rarely able to be used to its full capabilities. Once again, it's situational. This ability has so many flaws, it's downright embarrassing. Wing's basic attack involves Kirby shooting feathers in a random pattern that can only be slightly angled. And while you'd think this ability's aerial prowess should be immense, it's really not. Sure, the dash attacks it has in mid-air are neat, and the unique flying ability is cool, but there's a major problem with this. So much as tapping the jump button in mid-air resets your dash. The move that makes this ability stand out from all the others cancels what makes it interesting. If flying with this ability just didn't reset your dash, it would be so much better. For now, it's a wing and a miss. Stone. It is not very good. It's slow, it's not very versatile, it's only got one move, and much like high jump and wheel, it's only really good in certain scenarios. Thankfully, the scenario that makes it good is far more common, and is what makes this ability infamous for being so good. It has a surprisingly high damage output, and when Kirby is in his stone form, he is completely invincible. This makes it a must for cheesing the true arena, and it does that very well. However, cheesing the true arena this way is still very tedious, as you need to wait for an opportunity to change back from stone form without getting hit, and there are other abilities on this list that can cheese the true arena much faster and much more efficiently. Our next member of the Why Did They Completely Forget About This Ability After Squeak Squad club, Bubble suffers from the same problems as Laser and Ghost, but to a far lesser degree. It actually has some serious upsides, especially in the game it comes from, where it can turn enemies and items into bubbles and save them for later use. The problems are its low damage output and its restrictive moveset. Now, you know the drill. If they would just bring this ability back in a modern installment and give it the full moveset that it deserves, it would actually stand a chance against the competition. I honestly don't even know what to say about this ability. I know I've probably already said something like this earlier in the script, but I really mean it this time. It's not bad. It's just not good either. It kind of just exists. It's got alright melee capabilities, but it also doesn't have any real projectiles. The gimmick of it floating is a nice touch, but it doesn't really contribute to anything outside of just being cute. The overhead protection from the umbrella is also a nice attribute, but again, it doesn't really come in handy outside of fighting Kracko. It's just an okay ability. I really don't know what else to say about it. I know a lot of people would have my head for putting this ability so far down, but I'm going to be fully serious with you. I just don't like it. For starters, the Earthbound reference is definitely appreciated. I won't act like that's a negative. Additionally, the damage output on this ability can get ridiculous, and the ability to just delete your hurt box at any moment is a definite plus. The negatives, however, are the fact that there is so little to do. You have a counterattack, which is neat, but other than the teleportation and the ball of psychic energy, that's it. You have a whopping 3 attacks, 2 if you don't count the counter, which I personally don't, and it gets old very quickly. You PK fired, but you PK missed. Alright, Raise your hand if you've heard this one before. It's an ability in a game made by Flagship, which has a small moveset and could have been so much more if it had just been included in any game post Squeak Squad. In Magic's defense, it actually did get a major upgrade in Squeak Squad, because in Amazing Mirror, it was just a boring single-use ability. In Squeak Squad, however, it's actually really fun to use. It's almost like a somewhat stripped-back version of Circus. I just wish I could use it more. Okay, last one, I promise. The final contender of the Squeak Squad syndrome, Animal is easily the best of the abilities that were just completely forgotten about. We've reached the point in the list where I'm starting to run out of abilities that I actively dislike, and more so just abilities that I either like or just don't really care for either way. Believe me though, Animal would have absolutely made the top 20 if it got back in any other game and had a massive revamp. But as for now, it's just a good ability. Not bad, not by a long shot, but it could absolutely be better. Supposedly, from what we've seen of Forgotten Land, Animal has a surprisingly good chance at returning in that game. Here's to hoping it does. Coincidentally, if I had to sum this ability up in one word, it would be creative. Getting the negatives out of the way first, I'm not a very big fan of how slow the moveset is. The ability to summon drawings of the Kirby's Adventure sprites of King Dedede, Meta Knight, and Bandana Waddle Dee, as well as Big Kirby, is a beautiful callback to Adeline's boss fight, but they do take a while to draw and can't really be used as burst options due to how long they take to make. Additionally, the only two melee attacks Artist has both feel a bit sluggish, and I dare you to find a use for the sculpture move. This ability's biggest positive, however, is Still Life. I'm not taking into consideration any of the other friend abilities, but since Artist has only ever been in Star Allies, I'll give it a pass. Artist has the capability to summon healing items at will, and, well, that's not broken at all, is it? Actually, it really isn't. At least not to the extent that Fridge was in Kirby 64. Still Life does actually have a pretty lengthy cooldown, which balances it out nicely. I kinda don't even care. I mean, seriously. I know I literally just said something about Parasol similar to that, but like, I seriously don't even know what to talk about with Jet. It's a very huge one-trick pony. To paraphrase the legendary Countdown creator Wambu, Jet turns Kirby into a jet plane, and he punches everything to death with his jet plane fists. There's really not much else to say about it other than that dang heckin' Kirby do a zoom. That's basically what Jet Kirby is in a nutshell. Aside from the fact that when Kirby is charging power, his exhaust pipe actually deals damage behind him, which gives me huge Corrin vibes from Smash Bros. All I can really do is give it points for creativity. But honestly, when somebody mentions a very unique and creative ability introduced in Superstar that was brought back in Planet Robobot, my mind isn't exactly going to be thinking of Jet, and when somebody mentions an ability that is really good at going fast, it's also not going to be thinking of Jet. It's just kinda outclassed. Not good, not bad, just outclassed. I really wish I could enjoy this ability as much as other people do. I guess if I had to pinpoint something that I don't like about it, it would be the overall low damage output. None of Leaf's moves hit with any real impact, and with the sole exception of the uppercut, they all feel really weak. Not only this, but I personally find them to be fairly slow and almost spammy in a way. I don't find them to combo into each other as fluidly as I would like them to, and that really negatively impacts my opinion on this one. But don't get me wrong, this ability isn't bad by any means, not by a long shot. Just know that it isn't my cup of tea. This ability falls into a similar camp as Leaf, where I don't dislike it, not at all, I just wish I liked it more. I love the aesthetic of the ability, but a lot of the moves are either weak or have incredibly limited functionality. The wall cling is a nice touch, as is the weird water gun move that Kirby has when floating on the surface of water, but they aren't going to be used very often, if ever. Additionally, the smoke bomb and blossom dance techniques are thematically very cool, but I personally struggle to find use for them. The katana and the shockwave it sends out are where this ability shines, as they are easily the strongest moves this ability has to offer, but on the opposite spectrum, the kunai projectiles are just boringly weak. Again, I do like it. I just wish I could like it as much as other people do. Listen, there was stiff competition, okay? I know Beam is a very beloved ability, and we're in the top half of the list now, so I'm going to try to make this as positive as I can. For starters, Beam has one of the most well-rounded movesets in the series. There are certainly better abilities for combat and even puzzle solving, but as far as abilities go, Beam is just fine. You have your basic Beam Whip, which is good for just some quick damage, and you've even got a charge shot for anything that you can't reach normally. If you need a quick melee option, you have a Spiral Beam in the form of a dash attack, and even a grab for the smaller fry. Finally, while I do like the aerial beam attack just fine, my personal favorite is the Revolution Beam from Return to Dreamland, where you can just wave the beam around you and just float there. I don't understand why they went and got rid of this move in Triple Deluxe and then proceeded to never bring it back, but hey, I'll take what I can get. And what I got ain't too shabby. I gotta say, Mr. Sakurai, you chose a pretty good ability to be your favorite. The quintessential projectile. If you want to hit things from a distance, Cutter is the go-to copy ability for you. The major downside of this ability is the fact that the boomerangs are, well, boomerangs. They have limited forwards range, but this negative comes with the positive, because while the boomerangs can only go so far ahead of Kirby, they also have infinite range behind Kirby, and because you can angle them, you're able to take advantage of that range by just facing away from the enemy when you throw the boomerang. Unfortunately, this positive also comes with a negative, as you can't really take advantage of this in smaller spaces, and because the boomerangs break whenever they hit a wall, rooms with walls are where this ability struggles. In the end though, this ability definitely has more positives than negatives, especially when you consider the cutter itself can be charged to bounce off of these pesky walls, and if you're ever in a pinch, you can always unleash the dreaded final cutter. I don't even know what it is about Whip that I love so much, I just like it. I guess if I had to pinpoint something that I really enjoy, it's the sheer speed of the ability. It doesn't solve pretty much any puzzle, and it's not even that practical in terms of combat, but it's just really satisfying to slash away at everything with a whip ripped straight out of Indiana Jones. It gets bonus points for being able to collect items with the whip itself, and all of the charge moves allow you to pick up enemies too, and fling them around suplex style. Can you see why I'm kinda cold towards suplex? There are just so many abilities that do the same thing, but with more outside of just the grab itself. It's far from the best ability out there, but it's very fast and to the point, and it even has some decent range on it as well. It's just all around very satisfying to use. Let's get the obvious out of the way first and foremost. Spear's biggest upside, and the primary thing this ability is known for, is the Spear's ungodly reach. This thing has easily one of the safest melee attacks in the franchise. And because the people over at HAL Laboratories thought that giving the Spear the range of a projectile wasn't nearly enough, they decided to go one step further and give it a goddamn projectile anyway. So needless to say, this ability is one hell of a powerhouse when used for combat, but it's also got some nifty puzzle solving capability as well. Not only can the Spear itself cut ropes and grass, but because the Spear is almost as long as the time in between my uploads, it can hit through walls. And obviously, I can't talk about Spear without mentioning the Waddlecopter, because this ability didn't have enough already, so screw it. Let's give this thing a movement option too. Admittedly, I don't care for the Spearcopter as much as most people, but I'm obligated to mention it because it's as stupid as hell. So to recap, you've got yourself an ability with extremely long reach, a spammable projectile, great damage output, puzzle solving, and good mobility. Yeah, can you see why I want Waddle Dee to be playable in Smash? Alright, here it is. The most common copy ability in the franchise, Sword has gotten special treatment throughout the series' history. Sword started out as nothing but a single sword swipe, but ever since it donned that iconic green cap in Superstar, things only ever went up for it. It got a spin attack to hit both sides of it at once. It got an upward slice that combos from the dash attack and into the downward strike. It got a quick aerial slash as well as a stall then fall sword stab, and it even got a projectile in the form of a full health sword beam or an energy blast ripped straight out of the 6th best 3D Zelda game. This ability could be best described as the ultimate jack of all trades ability, but unfortunately, it also just so happens to be the master of none. There are other abilities that are stronger, have better puzzle solving aspects, and are just all around more fun to use than Sword. I end up getting bored after using it for too long, but for what it's worth, it's a damn good ability, even if I do personally find it a tad overrated. If you've ever played Return to Dreamland, you know full well about how devastating Spark can be when used properly. The mere act of shaking the Wiimote gives Kirby a temporary shield that damages enemies upon contact or, more importantly, can be shot at enemies. These shots are incredibly fast, go through walls, pierce through enemies, deal ludicrous amounts of damage, and are even easily spammable. Because the force field shots have infinite range, you can stay as far away from a boss as you want and don't have to risk taking damage from needing to get involved in close quarters combat. Admittedly, the rest of the moveset is pretty lacking, being just a far better version of Needle, and it really only shined in Return to Dreamland, but in Triple Deluxe and Planet Robobot, it got nerfed hard. The lack of motion controls means you have to resort to D-pad mashing, which is just no. But honestly, I don't find this to be a big enough setback to ruin it, because this ability has rightfully earned its title as the original boss killer, even if that title was pretty short-lived. From an objective standpoint, Spear and Staff's placement should be swapped. Staff doesn't solve as many puzzles as Spear, nor is it as combat practical. However, what Staff lacks in strength, it makes up for in both fun factor, and more importantly, range. Remember how I said that Spear had one of the safest melee attacks in the franchise? Yeah, I said one of for a reason. This is the safest melee ability. Staff may not have a projectile like Spear does, but that doesn't matter when Staff takes everything Spear does and turns it up to 12. As long as the enemy is within the same multiverse as you, they're as good as dead. Other than the fact that it makes a Spear look like a goddamn toothpick, I just find it generally more fun to use. I prefer the pole vault over the waddlecopter, and the bendiness of all the attacks just makes it click with me a lot more than Spears. Some people just want to destroy things, and I am certainly one of those people. Fire, as should be fairly obvious, is a very destructive ability, and as such, I very much do enjoy it. What I don't like about it is the default Fire Breath attack. It doesn't really do much, and it's pretty slow. And honestly, that's about it. Everything else feels so fun to use, and each attack combos into each other seamlessly. They all deal a lot of damage as well, and a lot of the moves have a surprising amount of invincibility, which means it's a lot better than you'd think against bosses. And while a lot of people might point to the burning attack, my personal favorite is the fireball, because it is way too satisfying to roll across the ground and walls, destroying everything in your path. You can even jump with it. Damn, what a good ability. So, what's the problem? Well, you'll see in a bit, but there's an ability that does a lot of what fire does, only better. I'll leave it at that for now. Doctor's main point of focus is the Science Lab attack. With it, Kirby can make one of 4 different concoctions. The first and rarest of which is the Healing Potion, which, just guess what it does. The other 3 all deal different types of elemental damage. The Red Potion creates a thin vertical column of fire that can melt ice, burn grass, and light fuses. The Blue Potion conjures a whirlwind of ice above Kirby, which can freeze fire blocks and enemies. Finally, my personal favorite, the Yellow Potion shoots out several sparks that deal a lot of damage. On its own, this one attack makes Doctor an incredibly versatile ability for both puzzle solving and combat, as it has access to 3 different elements for puzzles, as well as an attack that shreds through bosses, and a healing option for combat. Not only this, but you also can store the potion after you craft it and use it for later, provided you don't get hit, of course. The other attacks are pretty niche, all things considered. The pills are pretty slow, the clipboard has a lot of end lag, the medicine spray is a bit cumbersome to use, and the bandage spin is absolutely useless. But the Science Lab alone gives Doctor some of the best utility in the game, and that's what brings it up so far on the list. Here it is, the most combat-focused ability in history. Sure, there may be abilities that are stronger, such as Hammer and Archer, but no other ability was made with combat as the primary focus of its design. This ability, quite literally, has everything. It has a quick burst option in the form of the Vulcan Jab. It has movement options in every single direction. The rising break for vertical movement, the spin kick for horizontal movement, and the sky kick for fast downwards movement. It has a weak but fast projectile in the form of the Smash Punch, and a slower but incredibly powerful projectile in the form of the Force Blast. It has up close and personal grabs, it has aerial techniques, fire properties, invincibility frames. It has everything and more for somebody who just wants to kick some ass. Not to mention, it is the single ability with the best combo potential, period. If the Hadoken, Shoryuken, and Tatsumaki Senpikaku weren't an obvious enough reference, how about the ability to cancel each move into each other? Yep, you can cancel any move with any other move, for the most fluid moveset in the series. It can't solve many puzzles, and there are definitely stronger abilities that take out bosses faster, but if you just want an old-fashioned beatdown, this is the ability for you. Disclaimer, my opinions are very bad. If it wasn't already obvious from me putting Suplex in the bottom 10, or me putting Spear well under Doctor, then how about me snubbing Fighter from the top 15, all because I'm a really huge fan of that one broom ability from Dreamland 3. Oh, and trust me, this isn't the last you'll see of my bad opinions. Oh, no. But in all seriousness, this ability isn't terrible. Don't get me wrong, in Dreamland 3 this ability was awful. It was slow, didn't do much damage, and had an attack range that would make even Needle look like plasma. This ability was seen as a joke because outside of the planned return in the cancelled GameCube game, it only had the one appearance in a game that nobody cared for. But 21 years later, it made its grand return in Star Allies, and what a glow up! This ability went from laughably bad to an ability with one of the most creative movesets I've ever seen. You can now hold down the attack button to continuously sweep and even move while doing so, and they decided to incorporate the animal buddies from Dreamland 3 into the moveset as well. You can fly with Choo-Choo, gain invincibility frames with Nago's dash attack, and gain a projectile with Pitch. Oh yeah, and I should probably mention that this ability is also one of only 3 abilities in the series' history to naturally have access to more than one element, those being wind and water. The only other abilities like this are Doctor and UFO. Long story short, be careful who you make fun of in high school, because they might just come back 2 decades later to get the last laugh. Remember 4 entries ago when I said there was going to be an ability that was basically just fire, only better? Yeah, this is what I meant. First off, I know what you're going to say, and yes, there are a lot of significant differences between fire and ice. The first major difference is that fire's dash attack is functionally identical to the burning ability and can be used in midair, whereas ice's dash attack is functionally identical to the freeze ability and can only be used on the ground. The second major difference is that fire's breath attack can be angled and can turn on into the bonfire attack, while ice's cannot do either of these, and is a steady stream in front of Kirby. Another difference is that, with the exception of Return to Dreamland, ice has a midair spin attack that fire does not have, and finally, ice has an attack similar to a grab, as well as a special guard that blocks all incoming damage, while fire has neither of these. Yes, I know that they have their differences, but all of these I feel are a positive change, and the thing that makes ice so much better in my eyes is the obvious gimmick of freezing your enemies. This, along with the ability to kick the frozen enemies, allows ice to set up traps that can be used for additional damage, and all of it just comes together to make it feel so much more enjoyable than fire, and somehow even more destructive. For an ability as graceful as ice, it has some of the best damage per second of any ability in the game, and is one of the most fun abilities to just use. They even made its dash unique by giving it ice physics, and they still somehow made that awesome! How did you make ice physics a positive? I love how chaotic this ability feels. There's one thing to this ability, and that is to huck bombs at everything that moves. You have everything. You've got bomb throwing, bomb dropping, bomb bowling, and of course, my personal favorite, laying a bomb on your enemy's head and watch as they flail in terror as the explosive device on their forehead slowly but surely brings forth their untimely demise. You know, for kids. In all seriousness though, I really don't know what else to say. Sometimes all you really need is a little bit of go stupid, go crazy in your life, and Bomb provides exactly that. Here it is, the ability you've all been waiting for. Hammer. Known for being the strongest ability ever made, Hammer is seen as the king of them all, and for good reason. Having a lot of attacks that grant invincibility, such as the Hammer Spin, Hammer Twirl, and the Mid-Air Hammer Swing, it allows for a boost to survivability while also dealing some crazy damage. The Mid-Air Ultra Giant Swing attack is one of the strongest and fastest attacks in Hammer's moveset, and allows for some of the best DPS of any ability in the game, period. But of course, I can't possibly talk about Hammer without mentioning the absolutely catastrophic Hammer Flip. This move not only deals damage while charging, but when it finally lets loose, it is the single strongest attack in the game, not including abilities like Crash or Mike. Not only is it ludicrously strong, but it also has fire properties, which allows it to solve more puzzles than just slamming stakes into the ground. Hammer has absolutely earned its reputation, but the reason it just barely didn't make it into the top 10 is because, well, I just find the rest of these abilities to be more enjoyable. Sure, Hammer is an absolute killer and does a hell of a lot with surprisingly little, but also I just find these last few to be more fun. But don't let that get you down, Hammer, because when I just want a good old-fashioned one-on-one clobbering, this is the ability I'd choose any day of the week. Because of course the ability to effectively canonize Super Smash Bros. Would place well on this list. The reference to Smash is already enough to rank it highly, but it manages to be an amazing ability on top of that. It combines some of the best moves from a lot of abilities, while even adding in its own unique attacks like the Twinkle Star. It has the speed and fluidity of Fighter, the sheer DPS and fire properties of Hammer, the projectile and rope cutting of Cutter, Stone's stake pounding and invincibility, Ninja's grab, and a burst movement option in the form of the smash kick. This ability is awesome! It not only manages to be an amazing reference to one of my favorite franchises, but it also manages to combine some of the best properties of some of the best abilities and just rolls with it. So much puzzle-solving potential, so much combat prowess, so much fun! The only thing that prevents this ability from ranking much higher is the same thing that Hammer suffered from, where I just generally find the rest of these more enjoyable. But damn, it hurts to see this come so close to the top 10, but just barely not make it, because this ability is one of the greatest of all time. After hyping it up countless times within the previous 40 entries, the time has finally come for me to talk about the one, the only, the master sniper itself, Archer. I've mentioned how Archer is one of the best abilities for taking on the true arena, but what exactly sets it apart from all the other abilities that have some massive potential for boss rushes? Well, what if we took all of the strongest aspects from the other three abilities that I praised for the arenas and rolled them all into one? Archer has the invincibility of Stone, the range and speed of Spark, and the raw power of Hammer. All of the other abilities only really have one aspect that sets them apart from the others, but Archer takes it all and just slaughters. Fully charged arrows take mere seconds to charge up, have infinite range, travel incredibly fast, and will deplete a boss's health bar before you can even say boom, headshot. And as if this wasn't enough, as if this couldn't possibly satisfy your needs, you could just say screw it and go completely intangible. All you need to do is crouch. That's it. All it takes is holding down, and you're completely immune to all forms of damage. The only thing that holds this ability back is that it's only truly useful in boss fights. Using it in an actual level is somewhat boring since all the enemies die in one hit anyway, and this thing sucks in close quarters. On top of having some pretty lackluster crowd control, it's also only really designed for solving puzzles that are obviously designed for Archer. If you want to beat the true arena, this right here. This is your ultimate choice. But if you think I'm going to use you outside of that, that's apples, mate. Yo-Yo is another one of those abilities that is majorly held up by its uniqueness and creativity. Yo-Yos are already an extremely creative toy, and that creativity is expressed wonderfully through the ability's moveset. You've got the classic yo-yo throw, around the world, walk the dog, and even a brand new technique in the form of Gazer Spiral. It's even got some surprising utility too, because the yo-yo itself can go through walls to hit switches. You can even grab enemies with it, for some reason. Honestly, my biggest nitpick with this ability is that I feel like it doesn't go far enough with the concept. There are some absolutely ridiculous things people have been able to do with a yo-yo in real life. And the most impressive trick in Kirby's arsenal, that exists IRL, no cheating, Mr. Gazer Spiral, is probably just around the world. I kind of wish there was a way to hold down the button after performing a regular attack and control the yo-yo manually like you can in Terraria, but what we have is still more than enough. Additionally, and this doesn't affect the ranking at all, but apparently this thing is supposed to be a reference to Ness from Earthbound? I don't know, other than the fact that Ness sometimes uses a yo-yo, I don't really see it. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if the Jet Robobot mode was a regular ability? Well, you don't have to wonder anymore. UFO Kirby completely flips the genre and turns my favorite platformer into an incredibly unique shoot-'em-up. Removing all gravity and giving Kirby a blaster, UFO is one of, if not the most unique ability in the series. Kirby's blaster has 5 stages of fire. The first is a basic attack identical to the beam ability, even having electricity properties. Lightly pressing B twice gives Kirby a small orb that rotates around him. Not the most useful shield in the world, but it doesn't hurt to have and is easy enough to set up. The first charge of Kirby's attack is a small laser that bounces off of angles and is somewhat spammable. The second charge is a slightly bigger laser that has heat properties. This combined with the electricity beam makes UFO the third and final ability to have access to more than one element, giving it ample use in puzzle solving. The third stage of the laser is where it starts to get more powerful, as it starts shooting 2 beams diagonally up and down and sort of a damaging aura in the back, as well as being able to travel through walls. The fourth and final stage is where it gets really good though, as it deals stupidly high damage and shoots a laser forwards, up, and down, and in the back. There's also a niche dash attack and a functionally useless, but admittedly cute abduction attack. The ability all around makes the game an incredibly different experience, while still keeping it interesting and fun. The only gripe I have with it is the fact that it's only really good in one game, and in said game, it was either paid DLC via Amiibo, or content exclusive to a 100% completed file. Other than that, though, this ability is amazing. Alright, this is the final bad opinion, I swear. Like Bomb, this ability is very much a turn your brain off ability. It's got fire properties to solve puzzles, sure, but where it really shines is just how enjoyable it feels to use. Acrobatics, balloon animals, juggling, tremapolines, and, most importantly of all, the goddamned beach ball. Good lord, the beach ball. I don't know what the people of HAL Labs were thinking when they were making this attack, but they clearly laced this ability with that extra ingredient of give it all of the roids. This one attack, deals so much damage to bosses. You're completely invincible during it, although you're not invincible after it's finished, so if the boss doesn't get out of the way, you are going to take damage. But it deals way too much damage per second for a beach ball. So in short, this ability is all about having fun. And what else would you expect from a circus? Jolly good show, my pink friend. Jolly good show indeed. Finally, the ability to play as the one and only crime-fighting Spiderling himself, Spider-Boy. Incessant Marvel fangirling aside, this ability really does feel like you're playing as him, constantly zipping through the air without touching the ground, shooting webs from your fingertips. This ability, yes even including Circus, might just very well be the ability I enjoy using the most on this list. When I first saw that they were going to be including a spider ability in Star Allies, I was immediately interested. I knew as soon as I saw it, it would turn out to be one of the most original abilities, and I'm glad to say I was right. Each attack on its own is pretty mundane, but the thing that ties them all together is the web mechanic. Enemies and some objects that get hit by a web get tied up into this cocoon that you can knock around by running into or hitting it. Considering how many webs you can set up at once, you can lay down a lot of traps and rack up some serious damage. So it's both fun to use and insanely useful for crowd control, which means it's amazing for just use in regular levels. The only problem I have with this ability is the fact that there isn't a single puzzle Spider can solve that can't be solved by simply just damage tanking. Other than that one admittedly pretty major issue, I honestly find this to be the most underrated ability in the series. I don't know why I never see anyone talking about it. It really is spectacular. This is the ability I know you guys have been anxiously waiting for. Mirror is, for good reason, seen to be one of the best abilities in the series, even going as far as winning the copy ability poll that Nintendo themselves held during the lead up to Kirby Battle Royale. As is evident by the fact that this ability is number 5 rather than number 1, I absolutely love this ability, though not to the extent that most others do. I suppose I'll start with what I dislike about Mirror, to get it out of the way. I do feel that the moveset does get a little bit cramped, if that makes any sense. It's the problem we've seen with a lot of the other abilities, where I feel like there could be a little bit more going for it. But other than that one issue, this ability is amazing. It's easily the most unique ability in the series' history. Go ahead, name any game other than Kirby that has mirrors in it. Alright, Zelda. Tell me, what does the mirror shield do in that game? If you answered, it reflects projectiles, congratulations! You've played literally any Nintendo game ever. Mirror Kirby, on the other hand, decides to take it one step further and not just limit itself to reflecting, but bases its moveset around reflections, mirror images, clones, copies of Kirby that are used to his advantage. Mirrors are widely underutilized in video games, typically just being used to bounce projectiles back, but Mirror Kirby takes full advantage of the concept and turns it into the single most unique ability out there, even more than Ghost. My one complaint of how I felt the moveset felt a bit lacking feels null and void, considering how this is way more creative than it could have been if they just decided to go with the usual route. Mirror may not be my favorite ability, but I absolutely respect it, and am acutely aware of why so many people adore it. It's time for me to obligatorily mention how it took us nearly 2 decades to get a water ability. First it appeared in the anime, 10 years after copy abilities were even introduced. Then, about a year later, it appeared in the cancelled GameCube game. Finally, 7 years after that, we finally got Water Kirby in Return to Dreamland. And hoo boy, was it worth the wait. If I could change one thing about this ability, it would be the hat design. I get that it's supposed to look like that so that the geyser attack can come straight from the hat, but I really do think that the anime design is way better. I don't even want the translucent body, I just want the hat. So, now that I've mentioned what I dislike about the ability, let me talk about what I do like about water. Everything else! I know some people might say that Water Kirby is too destructive, but let me tell you this. Have you been to the ocean before? That thing wants you dead. Just ask the people who have thalassophobia. Water will beat you senseless and give no remorse whatsoever, and Water Kirby more than shows that relentless power. You have a very spammable projectile that does decent damage and a deceptively large hitbox, an absolutely massive dash attack that turns you invincible, a high DPS rainbow attack, a geyser that reaches beyond the frickin' moon, a funny water fountain attack that I don't know the purpose for, but I like it because it's funny, and Splash, which is just about as useful as it is in Pokemon. It all feels so powerful, but also incredibly smooth at the same time. It all feels very fluid. Oh, I get it. It's because it's water. Now I know Circus at number 7 was a bit of an unpopular choice, but I'm sure I'm turning even more heads at this one. Really? Tornado at number 3. I mean, it's not bad, but is it really worth the bronze medal? Honestly, probably not, and I'm even kind of doubting myself with this choice, but hear me out. The biggest drawback of this ability is the fact that it is nearly impossible to control in all of its appearances. It's incredibly slippery, doesn't turn very well, and more often than not, Tornado sends you hurtling towards danger, or even into a bottomless pit, rather than away from it. Although this is very fitting for something as chaotic as a tornado, it is a very big issue. And while I can't deny the fact that this is a problem, I do feel that the pros of Tornado outweigh this massive con. For starters, it's very powerful. As in, like, Archer levels of powerful. It may not be as technically safe as Archer, since you do actually have to get up close to the boss to damage it, but this isn't something that needs to be worried about, since Tornado's attack makes you invincible anyway. As long as you make sure to distance yourself before the attack ends, this ability might even be better at killing bosses than Archer. The constant invincibility is only the cherry on top, since the absolutely ludicrous damage per second is where I think this ability shines. In Squeak Squad, it was already pretty good, but once again, Return to Dreamland comes in with the clutch because that game's version of Tornado is broken. Shaking the Wii remote makes the Tornado deal even more damage, have an even bigger hitbox, make it a lot easier to control, and even gives it a finisher attack with an absurdly huge hitbox that hits a lot of times. It's probably not the fastest or even the safest to use in the true arena, but it's my go-to pick every single time I get the chance. If you've been keeping track of each ability I've gone over up to this point, you'd already know what my number one favorite is. To keep the suspense up for everyone else though, I'm not going to reveal it just yet and talk about Beetle, the close runner-up for that title. Before I do though, I just want to ask the question of, how the hell do video games make insects just so much better? Like, really. You have bug-type Pokemon being one of the best types, you have Beetle and Spider Kirby, each being in my top 10 favorite copy abilities, and then you have two of my favorite games of all time being games about bugs. I don't even like bugs in real life. I'm terrified of them. Getting back on topic, Beetle Kirby. Beetle Kirby. This is it. If Sword was the jack of all trades, master of none, Beetle Kirby is the jack of all trades, master of everything. Beetle Kirby has an outstanding combat-focused moveset, can solve nearly every puzzle in the game, is fun to use, and, to round it all off, is incredibly common. Its moveset is so expansive that it can do pretty much everything. It has Sword's Flurry attack for quick damage as well as being able to cut ropes. It has Suplex's multi-directional throws and can even carry enemies on its horn and move them around. Slam down into the ground and punch down stakes like Stone can with the Hardhead Slam, and reach to infinity and beyond with the incredible range of the dash attack, hitting through walls just like Spear. As if it couldn't get any better, it upgrades your midair float just like Jet does, and turns it into an easily controllable hover. It combines all of this and more just like Smash Bros. Does, and takes the best of every ability in its arsenal and turns it into one of the best abilities of all time. I'm going to be honest, I can't find a single drawback of this ability. It's that good. It's strong, it's practical, it's fast, it's fun, it's downright cool. This ability is absolutely deserving of being this high on the list. But alas, there is one ability that was able to steal the spot from it. So, let's not keep it waiting, shall we? Poison. This is the ability that I hold closest to my heart. This is the one ability that I felt outranked all 49 of the other abilities on this list. But why? What about Poison makes it so special? Well, before I talk about it, I really want to say that Water and Poison are two distinct abilities. A lot of people compare the two, and I really have to disagree with them. Sure, they may seem similar at first, but aside from having a somewhat similar design and having 3 moves that they share, these two are completely different. Not only are most of Poison's moves completely original, but the 3 moves that it does share with Water are also significantly changed. The basic attack no longer travels along the ground, stopping where it lands and leaving a toxic puddle. The dash attack is the least changed, but it does leave a trail of poison in its wake. Finally, the geyser attack can be tilted, which is a much needed change in my opinion. Other than that, these two abilities are completely separate abilities and have much different playstyles. Poison has a lot of similarities to Spider, despite coming out before Spider, where its moveset has to do with setting traps. I do find Spider to be more enjoyable to use in levels, but there are two things that bring it down slightly. The first is how Spider's traps are only really usable if there are enemies to web up, whereas Poison's can be set up manually. And the second is that Spider is a bit weak, but Poison's traps are insanely strong. Each attack deals a lot of damage, and because you can have up to 4 different traps set up at the same time, you can cover a lot of ground and do a ton of damage in the process. Not only are the traps themselves fairly strong, but you also have a melee rapid attack that does just as much damage, if not more. This all adds up to being an incredibly strong ability, and while it may not be the safest for the true arena, it's by far the most fun I've had taking on bosses. But unlike most other true arena killers, I've actually had a lot of fun with this one in regular levels as well. The moveset may be primarily focused on killing bosses, but the crowd control and fun factor are still pretty high. It all culminates in an ability that stole my heart and has refused to let any other ability take the gold from it. Go figure that Poison would be the only ability from Planet Robobot to have never appeared in a single game after its debut. Not Star Allies, not Super Kirby Clash, not even Kirby Fighters 2. I guess no good thing lasts forever, but I can at least take solace in the fact that in the one game it's in, it was the uncontested king of abilities. Here's to seeing you again, my old friend. So, this is the end. About 4 years ago, I originally came up with a ranking of my top 10 favorite abilities, and somewhere down the line, I swapped some abilities around, added some more, made it into a top 50 rather than just 10, and then I just held it in my back pocket, waiting for a chance to bring it out. I decided 3 whole months ago to actually do something about it now that there was a new Kirby game coming out, and here we are. 50 abilities later, it's finally complete. Is it a perfect video? No. God no, there are more flaws in this video than there are flaws with Mini Kirby. For starters, the video is already outdated now that Drill and Ranger exist, and the fact that 11 entries just don't have footage due to me not having a way to record anything other than the Switch is just, well, it's honestly a little embarrassing. But all in all, I think it turned out just fine. The lack of footage on some abilities is upsetting, and I stumble over my words a lot, but I still think the video came out just fine. It was a fun experience trying to get this video completed before the deadline of the new game's release date. As for what the future holds, well, school is almost over, but I still need to finish strong. I need to focus more than ever on the classes I need to pass, but after June 1st, high school will finally be over and I'll have as much time as I need to myself, which should mean a slightly more consistent upload schedule. I should return to Let's Playing fairly soon, but I can't make any promises since a new Kirby game just came out and that's going to absorb all of my attention now. Thanks to everyone for watching, and happy 30th, Kirby. Here's to 30 more lovely years and many more adventures.